So I'm Tyler Cascade. I run marketing at Sleuth, and it's my pleasure to have Don Brown, our CTO, do a webinar, what I call Donanars, um, on the topic of pull requests. So Don, I'm gonna let you take it away. This is gonna be a pretty short one. As far as webinars go, we value everyone's time. We're gonna have a little bit of presentation and then time for discussion as well. All right, Don, take it away.
All right. Usually this is the part where I say, can everyone see and hear me okay? But this is our first time setting up things, so it might be a little bit delayed, the audio delayed, and I apologize in advance. We'll figure it out next time, I swear. But anyways, welcome to this. My name is Don Brown. I'm the CTO co-founder of Sleuth, and I'm here to talk about pull requests because if you are someone who does anything in tech, you do pull requests. And so let's talk about how to make them better, how to make them faster, how to make them a better experience to get more out of it. So, is this you? And let's see if this comes across okay.
Now, is there anyone out there who wants to go fast? Anybody?
I want to go fast.
Do you want to go fast? Do you want to have your dev team develop quickly and get code out quickly? Now, this is actually very relevant in the software industry, as shown in the State of DevOps report that I'm unfortunately standing right in front of. But anyways, what it did is it came out and it proved from a research science standpoint that there's a strong correlation between teams that deploy frequently and quickly and those that succeed in their business goals. Specifically, the elite teams are deploying they're deploying a change up to an hour. So from the time it starts coding to the time it hits production, it's an hour, which is very, very quick because you're going to need to review the code somewhere in there. And that's where the pull request process comes in. So as I've found, there's usually two types of teams. Those for folks that have understood Dora and what it's doing about, there's people who want to go faster, just like Will Ferrell. And those who want to stay fast. Maybe you're going to scale. Maybe your business is going to change a lot. You're going to double your team size, and you want to make sure that you keep your speed. So I guess, well, normally I would raise hands. This is my first time using Zoom, so it's a little bit awkward. Usually I'm used to like chat. I do streaming on Twitch, and so there's a chat, and people are talking constantly, and so it's a much more interactive type thing. If you did have a question, do feel free to jump in. But I guess maybe this is a rhetorical question. How many of you feel your team's fast enough? And I'm going to assume that no one raised their hand and everyone wants to go faster because that's why you're here. Because pull requests are the key. As I mentioned, when you're going to develop and ship software, you need to make sure that you're reviewing that code because if you go too fast, then you're pushing things out that aren't reviewed, that aren't tested, and you break production, and that's very bad. So you need to find this balance between it, and the pull request process is key in ensuring that you don't break things and don't go too fast. But you also don't want to go too slow. Pull requests, if you have been in software for anything more than probably 10 minutes, you know that pull requests can drag on and on and on. There can be comments and comments. There can be just sitting around waiting for someone to finally review your pull requests. And so they are often the slowest part in the deployment process. So my company is Sleuth, and we develop a tool that helps you track door metrics. And as part of this tracking door metrics, what we're doing is helping people see how fast they're going. And people often come to us and saying, I think my pull requests are too slow. How do I make them faster? And that was actually the original motivation for this webinar, for the video that we did, to try to answer some of those questions. How do you go faster? So this is going to be interesting. I have some kind of ground rules for this webinar. Again, it's my first one, so it's entirely possible I'm breaking all the rules. But I guess the first thing is ask questions anytime. It does a presentation. I do have slides and all this kind of stuff, but it's meant to be, I want it to be a little bit more interactive. As I said, I'm used to Twitch where people are always jumping in left and right. So if you want to jump in at any time, that's fine. We can actually display the questions right on screen and we can talk about them and answer them. So please feel free to use this feature of Zoom to ask questions. It's not as good as chat, but hopefully it works, because I want this to be a two-way street as much as possible. I'm going to share with some tips that I've learned over the years. I've been doing this for 20, 25 years professionally. And so I picked up a few tips. I'd like to hear yours as well. So you start with measurement. If you're ever doing any kind of improvement to a process, first you need to measure. If you're not measuring, then how do you know you're getting any better? Or even worse, how do you know that you didn't just make it worse? Particularly when you're thinking of adding process as a solution to a problem, if you're not measuring and you don't know the impact of that process and how much more it costs, if it's actually improving things, you actually could be making things worse. So you need to measure. So step one is definitely to measure. And what I like to do is I like to look at the change lead time. The change lead time is the definition from the moment that coding starts to the moment a change is in production. What you want to do is you want to make that as small as possible. The accelerate metrics in the State of DevOps report say that the elite teams get it down to under an hour, which I think is pretty aggressive. I think getting it under a day is pretty good to have it coded, have it go through pull requests, go through all the testing, and then actually go out to production. It's about a day. So if you want to get better, what I first recommend is don't just look at the pull request, but look at the entire change lead time to make sure that the pull request is even the thing you should be spending your time on. And then once you're looking at the whole change lead time, break that down into buckets. So for example, coding time, how long it's taking to code. The other bucket I like to use is PR lag time. So this is how long, once the pull request is ready, how long until the first person reviews it. Second is review time, and I realize I'm kind of standing in the way here. Review time, which is once the first person reviewed it, how long between that and when the pull request is actually merged. And then the deploy time. I really am in the way today. When it's ready to be deployed, the time between it's merged and the time it goes into production. And out of all of this, the real lesson is to find the biggest bucket. Look at all those different parts and find the biggest one to make sure that the time you're spending to improve things, which honestly is usually a rarity in software dev because you're always wanting to pump out features and features, the time you're actually trying to improve your process, make sure you're using that in the right way. So what does this look like? Let's take a look. For example, let's see if I can get the right button here. So this is my product. This is a product called Sleuth. And what's interesting about it is it tracks how well your team is delivering value. It tracks the door metrics. Change lead time is one of the metrics here. I think I can get my pointer thing working. Let's see, where's the pointer? I had it for a second. There it goes. So right now we're looking at change lead time, which is a measurement from how long it's taking to get a change out into production. We could also look at other things like deployment frequency or failure rates, things like that. And these door metrics are a really good way to make sure that as you're making things faster, you're not breaking things. That's really important to not just focus on speed, but make sure that you're also tracking things like change failure rate to make sure that you're not actually start to introduce a bunch more failures. But anyways, when you're talking about this is kind of down what I'm talking about in the buckets down here, where you're looking at things like your coding time, your review lag time, your review time, and then finally your deployment time. Look at this analysis to figure out what's taking so long, and then that allows you to make sure that the time you're spending improving things is time spending on the right thing. Okay, so let's say that we looked at it and we say that our PR lag time is a common one that slows people down. This is the time from when a pull request is ready to the first person reviewed. In a perfect world, everyone would jump in on a review immediately and help out. In reality, that doesn't happen. The reason why this one is really important is because the concern here is that you're burning out your best devs, your best developers. Because what happens is if you have a pull request, what people often do is put the whole team on the pull request. And most people ignore it, except for the one or two devs who tend to be your best devs. They're the ones that are always on pull request reviews. And it starts to be really exhausting. They feel like they can't get anything done. And so then they start putting it off and off. And so again, that lag time gets worse and worse. And so it's really important to, from a policy standpoint, find a way to assign one reviewer to a pull request so that you're not relying on somebody's guilt to actually do the pull request. Assigning one reviewer is key because that gives that person the responsibility. And when you give somebody the responsibility, feel like you do it. If everyone has responsibility, then no one has responsibility. Now, like anything, if you're going to make an improvement, I recommend you look at automating that improvement. Don't just have an improvement and do it manually. That's never going to happen. So you need to find ways to automate. So for example, what we're looking at here is we're looking at a file. If you're using GitHub, which is the most common source control, you can actually automate who gets put on reviews. I generally in GitHub, I like to put maybe a number of people on the reviews, but assign it to one person. But the point is you want to start to make sure even the people that are on the review are the right people on the review. If you always put one person on the review and they never do any code reviews, then you're just wasting time. So find a way to automate it. So in this file, you can do things like for all pull requests, I want to have this group or this user always on pull request. This might be your architect or your senior developer. You can say for all JavaScript files, I want to have this group or this person on it because they're experts in JavaScript. Because often you'll have on full stack devs, you'll have backend devs writing JavaScript or front end code, and you want to make sure that they don't do the things incorrectly. So you should put a JavaScript developer, an expert on the reviews. You might have, and as I said, you don't just do users, you can also do groups. Like in this case, it's called Octocats, but the idea is that you can put a whole group. And so you can take your groups that are managed in Google or Okta or wherever, and then you can bring them in and have them automatically added to reviews. That can be handy. You can also have individual paths. So for example, if you have a monorepository, then you can say service A is this group, service B is that group. So you can kind of automate this kind of thing, which is useful. And as I said, use that kind of prefixability. So that's just one example of automation, but find ways as you find your biggest bucket and then you figure out what you're going to do to improve it, find a way to automate that. That's going to make it last and not be something you do for a couple days and then forget about it. Because let's be honest, we all do that. Now, this is in GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket Server, and unfortunately no Bitbucket Cloud. I don't know if any of you are out there using Bitbucket Cloud, but unfortunately this is a long time pull request or feature request that doesn't exist. However, the good news is there is at least one thing on the marketplace that can kind of do some of this for you. In fact, actually, when I worked at Atlassian, I wrote a script that would automatically change the default reviewers list in Bitbucket via their API. So we kind of got this functionality. It's not as good as a code owner's, but it was okay. So find ways to automate it. Take that extra 10 minutes. It'll save you a lot in the long run. Now, my final tip before we have kind of more open up to discussion, because I have been kind of chewing through all of this, is to keep the pull request small and focused. Now, that's one of those things that is so much easier said than done. It's really easy to look at it and say, oh, keep your pull request small. And everyone says, yes, we're going to keep our pull request small. And then in practice, people say, oh, yeah, this one should be smaller, but it was a hard problem, or I couldn't break this up, or whatever. So it is very common for people everyone knows what to do. We all know to keep it small. But in practice, do we keep it small? We don't really. And so I wanted to give you a couple tips that I found useful to help encourage smaller pull requests, because when it's smaller, then it's easier for people to do a pull request. It's easier for people to review. When it's easier for them to review, then they're going to do it quicker and they're not going to put it off. Because if something's hard, then you're always going to procrastinate. You're always going to say, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do it later. I'm really busy right now. But if it's something you can jump in and do quickly and it's not very painful, you're going to be more likely to do it. So it's really important, if you're thinking of from a top-down process standpoint, find a way to make sure your pull requests are easy to do so they're more likely to get action, so they get done sooner. So improve your change lead time and you accomplish your business goals. You see how all that kind of fits together. Anyways, so keeping them small, but how do you keep it small? Let's talk about a couple ways that we can do that. By the way, I don't see any comments, so please feel free to jump questions or figure out how the heck Zoom works. I'd love to have your feedback, see if this makes sense. Am I going through this too fast? Honestly, I spent all this time trying to get like the audio visual and all these things set up. I didn't go through and time it. So actually, I'm not even sure how long we're going right now. Ooh, actually, we're about getting time. So good. Because actually, when I did this on Twitch, it ended up taking me about an hour. So I'm trying to compress that down a little bit. Anyways, use a PR policy. So the idea here is have your developers sit together and to come up with what's important to them and guidelines. So, and write that down as kind of a shared document that you all agree on. That will save you so much time and hassle later. You don't want to be in the middle of a contentious pull request where all these people are upset and yelling at each other. That's the wrong time to try to say, hey, let's have a new policy. Do it ahead of time. Again, it's an investment. Do it now and it'll save you some time. So what should be in this pull request policy? Well, first off, you want to define these things up front. That's really important. In fact, I would say if you don't have a pull request policy, define one tomorrow. Policy is a big word and it sounds painful, but really it's something that'll save you. So I like to put into pull requests how to assign reviewers. This is really useful to make sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone's assigning reviewers in the right way, as well as useful when you bring on new people, then they can read the stock and immediately understand how the team works. The second is valid types of feedback. So you can get all kinds of things in a pull request. You can get a lot of nitpicky things like add a space here, add something here, to why the hell are we even doing this? This is completely wrong. We should be doing something completely different. So defining what kind of things people should be giving in pull requests is really useful, because nothing is more discouraging than doing a bunch of work, putting out that pull request and having somebody say, this is all wrong, you wasted your time. You should do it differently. That sucks. So kind of spell out what kind of things should happen here. And then 2, how to respond to feedback. So what are the expectations? Once feedback is given, what are the expectations? If someone says that I should do it differently, do I have to listen to them? Can I just do it anyways? Can I do what I want now and then do a second pull request after that addresses their comments? These are all questions a developer has, and it's the more that you can define that together as a group, the easier it's going to be when it comes up. And finally, who and when to merge. So who should do the merge is one big thing. Is it only your senior developers? Is it anybody? Is it only the author? Or maybe anybody but the author? Define that up front. And then when to merge. Is it whenever you want? Do we only merge on Tuesday mornings? Do we merge on Friday afternoons right before you go to work, get off work? Some places I usually work at will have policies you don't merge on a Friday afternoon, because you're probably not going to be around to deal with any problems that come up, and that screws over whoever's on call. So you want to kind of think through these kind of things. And again, the more you can put this into a document, the better off you are. So this is what it looks like in my case. Now, I'm not going to go through each one. In fact, I'm even going to zoom it in so that you can't read each one, because it's probably all pixely and shit. It'll drive you nuts. But the point is actually this is something that before this even talk, this is one of the first things. We got a senior dev on the project. One of the first things that she did was write out these things, write out this policy so that we could get everybody on the same page, had that discussion while it's not in the middle of a heated PR review, and it was better. So I recommend you have a policy. Second, tackle large PRs at their source. So it's easy to say split up things correctly, but this is where I think it's actually more the onus is on the lead than the developer. It's all about breaking up the task appropriately, and that will make the PRs more likely to be broken up correctly. So if that's an issue for you, maybe spend some time and maybe look at your planning process, see how that's working. And then tech specs is the other good one. I find that if it's anything that is going to be complicated or contentious, I have the person write a little tech spec. This is an example of a tech spec that we use. It goes through things like a summary, the goals, what this is trying to do, key scenarios. These are kind of key use cases, key processes, things that kind of just in step-by-step UML sequence diagram style kind of walks through. And then finally the implementation. But it doesn't take a long time to do these kind of tech specs, but what it does is it forces the person to sit down and think this kind of things through, as well as get buy-in from other developers that that's how it should be done. Then when a pull request comes, it's just implementing the tech spec, not a big deal. But without that pull request, this might be the first time people are seeing how this solution is going to be done, and they might object and say, what the hell, this is all wrong. So you want to, again, try to find ways to nip things in the bud before they become big issues. So the takeaway from this whole super fast whirlwind course on webinars is PRs don't have to suck, but a good PR process is the backbone of an elite team. And again, this is shown by research. This is if you are someone who is trying to deploy more quickly and to get code out, you really need to focus on that pull request view. And I'll just say one quick little shout out to the DORA metrics, because it's important to not just look at your speed, but also look at your change failure rate and your mean time to recovery failure metrics. Balancing failure metrics and speed metrics is a good, healthy way to tackle these kind of things. Because again, I know we all don't have a lot of time for doing improvements like this, but when you do them, you want to make sure that you're doing them right. Now it's time for questions and answers. Does anyone have any questions? I threw a bunch of stuff out at you. I'm curious if there's other tips that you have that have worked in your case. Let me know. I'm actually going to switch from the standing up and I'm going to go back to a sitting just so that we can fix some of these audio issues. But yeah, feel free to share them and let's chat. Thanks.
I would also say that you could just unmute yourself and ask questions because I have enabled that.
All right, how's my audio? Is it a little bit better now? Actually, it's probably still off. Hold on, let me get that even better. Not that camera. How about this camera? Can you hear me okay, Tyler?
I can hear you fine and your lag is gone, it looks like.
Hooray. Yeah, I just switched up the setup.
I have a question that's not directly related to the pull request, but it's actually referring to the lead time. And you talk about from the first commit. While it is a bad habit for a developer to do that, but I've in my career seen it plenty of times where people will start on writing code, maybe write code for a day or two before they actually put their first commit in, which would mean that the lead time is vastly skewed.
Yes, I've seen that as well. Was it a question in there?
Oh, just kind of. I'm trying to understand the value of the lead time there. Since how do you handle the first commit? You don't know how long the developer actually spent on coding. I'm getting up to that lead time.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a tricky one to measure, especially because, again, you don't want to measure. Yeah, if you just sat down with a developer and say, about what time did you start working on it? You can measure it, but of course that doesn't scale. So you want to automate it. One technique that I found useful, if you're using Bitbucket or GitLab does this, sorry, not Bitbucket, GitHub or GitLab does this as well, but they can have draft PRs. And so I've seen one company, what they do is they create an issue, they create a branch and they create a draft PR before you start working. And then they created a little script that automated that. And then once the developer's ready, then they turn the PR into ready mode. That can be kind of a useful way because then you have usually some sort of branch creation tag, or maybe you did an initial commit there, or you can use the pull request created tag date as when you started coding, and then when it was ready as when the pull request was created, so to speak. That can be one way to do it, but it is a tricky thing to really measure how long someone is developing something. Honestly, I find that it can be useful to not focus too much on that part, but instead focus on how often are they shipping. Like, for example, in my teams, I always like to have everybody do at least one deployment a day. Not a hard requirement, but try to aim for that average. And then if it's going like a week and you haven't done anything, well, then we'd probably have things to talk about. But if you're doing one a day, then then it's probably okay. And then if I need to dig in more to figure out why, having that breakdown is useful. But honestly, sometimes I almost focus more on deployment frequency as a proxy for that. I don't know. What do you think? Is that right? What have you found?
No, that sounds good. I actually like the idea of the auto generating the branch, and I'm basically creating something in there, an initial commit for them the moment they start working.
Yeah, I know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, the only other question leading off of that too is my next question was going to be, so how often do you think the pull request? It sounded like you were talking about in your thing that you think that the developers pull request should be basically daily. And yeah, I mean, I agree. How small a pull request should be is kind of up for debate.
Oh my God, yes, that's a whole 2-hour conversation right there. Is what the right size is. How do you keep it that size? How do you do something large that can't be really broken up? And how do you do it in small pull requests? Because then you get into things like feature flags and using that as a technique to turn things on and off so that you can ship things dark. Maybe you'd have a little service function that you implemented, but you didn't implement the UI part, or that you did the database table, but you didn't use it. And that's one technique to kind of break things down. I think just generally, it's like as small as you can is probably the best answer I've found for it. Because there is no, like, you can't just say under 5 commits or under 200 lines of code changed. That just starts to feel like you're serving, you're sacrificing at the altar of the rule, just kind of sacrificing productivity to adhere to the policy. So that's why I was kind of say these things for me anyways are kind of more rules of thumb. Like, it's a good thing to keep in mind and to aim for, but I'm personally not a huge fan of like strict limits. They just feel like they get in the way more often than they not. I don't know. Have you had any success with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, we recently had a whole bunch of these really small tickets, and it led to a bunch of like 1-point tickets, and which leads to a whole lot of pull requests. And so the flip side to that is if it starts to feel like you're muddying the water, it starts to hard to track the progress and success when you have so many really small tickets, really small pull requests. So it almost felt like that maybe it is too small, but I don't know. It's not easy to determine that, because it is easier to obviously to review a pull request when you go in there and and it's really small.
Yeah, it's always, but then it almost becomes trivial. Like, you don't even, if you go too small, then as a reviewer, I don't even know what you're trying to do. All I know is you added a method that said, add this to the database table, but like, who's using it? What's the context? That can be confusing as well.
For sure.
But yeah, no, the too small thing is really interesting. That's why, just for me personally, I find that I work best if at the end of the day I created a pull request. So whatever I'm doing that day, find a way that I can break it up so it doesn't go beyond a day. That sometimes it does, and honestly, it probably does quite often. But that's just what I try to aim at. Sometimes while I'm doing bug fixing, I'll do like 1 or 2 hours, and so I'll just doing a bunch of little pull requests, but they're all for unrelated things. But if I'm doing something kind of bigger, I kind of like the day type thing, although you can't actually write a crap ton of code in a day. So that doesn't always make it easier for reviewers.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a tricky problem for sure. I mean, that's why I'm not a big fan of the hard and fast rules and stuff, because it's just so nebulous. It's like, try this, maybe this policy makes it a little bit better, but I don't think there's anything that you can point at and say, just do this and you're good.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. And I've also seen, so I've been on, I was a developer for 15 years. I'm a manager now. And so now I've seen a lot of pull requests go different ways. My last company, for instance, the developers had a tendency to pull requests to take a long time. Mm-hmm. And it did have certain advantages. I'll say that in the end, their code quality was always superb, and bugs were very, very rare. There was just so much thought put in. Everybody was super thorough. People would book out large swaths of time just to do code reviews and treating it like writing code. So I did have bonuses, but there obviously that balance. I've also seen the opposite, where code reviews almost feel like it's just more of something you got to do, look at it really quick and sign off on it so that they can get it merged down, and then you end up with a lot of bugs, things that were actually getting missed. So
yeah,
medium too.
Yeah, there was even a thread on Hacker News today about you don't even need pull requests, just go straight to master or main or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, I don't know. I don't think I'll go that far. Yeah, the one thing I will say that I found useful is there's one team that did this, and I really like it, which is I have at least one person, and this is why I say assign one person, but have that assigned person have to run the code locally. That I found catches quite a lot of things, because it not only has them understanding of the thing, because they have to figure out how to test it themselves. It helps with their QA, incorporating QA into the process. And then it also, it's another developer who understands that code a little bit more than if you just glanced at it. That's a really great policy that we use at Sleuth, actually, to, again, improve, kind of find that balance between taking too long and it's perfect, but now you're getting one thing done a week, or but going too fast and no one's caring what's happening. Having one person review it and run the code can get you pretty far.
That's all I have at the moment.
Awesome. Well, thank you, because it was so quiet. As I said, I'm used to the Twitch where it's just like things all the time, and I'm having to like try to focus and not answer every question at once. So it's taking some adjustment. That's okay. But thank you. Definitely thanks for the comment.
Thank you.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, cool. I have a question for you. I am curious about the review time. When I look at the definition, it says, time spent between first review and merge. So, merge obviously is pretty clear. But when you say first review, what are you measuring specifically? Are you measuring the first comment? Are you measuring the first time another user opens the PR? Or what is the exact measurement there that starts the review time clock?
That's a great question. I can give you two answers. One is, kind of how I think about it, and then two, there's how we implemented it in Sleuth, and that's the application that I was showing earlier. In Sleuth, what we do is we take the first time that we get the webhook from the source control system, GitHub, GitLab, something like that, that said that this person approved the review. So it's not the first time that they opened, it's not the first comment that they made, it's the moment where they click the approve button. That's how we found is the best way to measure it. You could make an argument for some of the other ones too. Like, what if someone did a giant review and then marked it as needs changes after that? Would you consider that as lag time, or would you consider that review time? It is tricky for sure. One thing that I have.
I see.
Yeah. So one thing that I found useful is if you're just tracking kind of that whole period of the review time, like that's how we do it in Sleuth. As you guess, I'm going to use that as an example quite a lot. But it will then let you order by which one's taking the longest. And then when you click on one, then you can see a detailed timeline of where the time was spent and what events happened. So sometimes when you're wanting to measure statistics, you're not really going to get it right in the micro sense, but you might be right in the macro sense. But if you're trying to improve it, then sometimes you need to go down to the micro sense to really understand what happened in this particular case. And there might be lessons to be learned at that level. So, well, that's a really complicated answer, but other than just say that it's tricky. How about that?
Okay, thank you. So let me just make sure I understand what you said. So the review time that we're looking at it is really the time from when someone approves it. So let's say I started reviewing, I took 4 hours to review this thing. I click the button approve. Now the clock starts on the review time.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. But those 4 hours that I spent actually looking at it is not something that is counted in the review time, but it's something that I can see if I drill down into it more. Is that a true statement?
Sometimes it depends on the source control system. Like usually there's not, from an automated standpoint, usually there's not an event when someone opened the pull request to start reviewing. There was a system that was called Crucible. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It was sold by Atlassian as part of an acquisition that I really liked the review system. And they would actually track when a pull request, like when someone started looking at it, and they would track what they did and like really created detailed timelines. GitHub and Bitbucket and all those, pretty much all they know is when you left a comment or when you click the approve or needs work button. So you might have spent 2 hours before then, and you really have no way from an automated standpoint to capture that. So I think that it's where you have to kind of just not put too much expectations on the metrics to be exactly right. You just want it to be generally right to catch the trends, and then you drill down.
I see. And in the review lag time, when it says, time spent between pull requests being opened and the first review. So the first review really means the first approval.
Correct.
It does not mean the first comment or the first request changes or the first declining, right? Or okay, I gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? I know we're long, but I do enjoy this part the most. Doesn't sound like it. Tyler, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, if there's no more questions, we could end this. I would say this is our first time using this setup. So any feedback you have on this, let us know. We'll figure out how to do this webinar, Dawn on Earth thing next month, because we're going to be doing this regularly. So I appreciate everyone that comes and participates, and good questions as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would add is feel free to check out Sleuth and get a free demo, or you can see how we use it. We actually make our data public, so you can see how we use it and change lead time and PR breakdown. You can see our actual stats on that. 2, if you ever wanted to come and just chat some more, I stream on Twitch. And then as Tyler said, we're also doing other webinars. And then 3, we do videos. We actually did a video of this, how to do pull request tips, and actually has a lot more tips than I covered. We did a video of that on YouTube, and that was actually recorded from my Twitch stream. So I took an hour-long stream and cut it down. So there's different ways. If you're interested in this type of content, there's different ways that you can get it.
You want to give a little preview of the next topic, Don?
Sure. So the next one, I about the slides halfway done. I'm not sure if we'll do the 20-minute or a little bit longer, but the idea is it's going to be a continuous deployment checklist. So if you are interested in doing continuous deployment and taking the speed of deployment to kind of its most extreme case, what do you need to have in place before you even consider something like that? Because I see too often that people just jump right into continuous deployment and say, oh, it's just a matter of automating my pipeline. Oh my God, don't do that. That's just going to screw you over in the end. You need to make sure that you have certain things in place. So, like automated tests, for example, to do an automated deployment, you have an automated test. That's crazy. So it's that kind of thing. So we're going to walk through kind of a checklist of things that I've found to be really useful as I've taken teams prior that were deploying every 3 months. So I took them deploying multiple times a day. These are things that I've put in place before I even considered something like continuous deployment.
Sounds great. All right, folks. Thanks again, and have a great weekend, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Bye.